Recording in progress.
We make, I mean, it helps to make one motion, but we discuss.
Discussion,
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. So let's start with December 13th. Any questions or comments about that? So, January 10th.
I think, yeah, that was the January 10th meeting, and there was one change on the page that, I think it's the last page, that had the committee assignments. So one of them had Grover on it. So we're changing that to Kelly, because that's what was decided at the meeting.
Oh, for the OES.
Yeah.
All right, okay. All right, and no questions or comments on that. How about the January 24th minutes? Any comments or questions on those? Okay. All right, seeing none from the council. Did you want to say something? I'm sorry. You got the gestures now, so let me open to public comments. Are there any public comments with regard to the minutes from either of those three meetings? All right, I see no public comments or corrections on those.
I'll vote to accept the minutes for all 3 months.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. All right, so we're moving right along. Now we are at staff report, or excuse me, council reports. So this is our committee assignments. So let me go, I guess, from left to right. So Jack West, do you have anything new for me?
Right. And I'm going to start by apologizing to everybody. We had what looked like a great trail committee meeting coming up last week, and unfortunately I got too sick to head the meeting, and so we decided to back out of it. Just seeing that we're doing some nice things, and we will be meeting as soon as I come up with a new date and get back to all the things we're working on. I have a short HCOG report. We've just so you know, if you've noticed by going by the Gentilly area turnout, excuse me, the work on the Eureka corridor, if you noticed the trees have been cut down. So the first step in the overpass and from between Eureka and Arcata is being done, and it will be continuing in spring. We're going to begin to actually see the work that to create the overpass and the trail that goes from Breakout to Eureka and the overpass to Indianola. So that is all in the works, and you're beginning to see the actual work being done, and still hopefully be done in 2023, possibly. And downtown Eureka is on a big move between 2023 and 2025. You'll see a lot of activity. The one thing that's going to take a long time is part of your anything from Indianola and Eureka right now, where the trail is going to go in. They are going to be replacing the slough bridge and both those bridges that go over the slough. Eureka, it's about $130 million project. So they haven't got the funding yet. So that is hopefully going to be done in 2029 or 2035. There's lots of changes through the Broadway area in Eureka. So keep your eyes open, and you go to HCOG, you can find out more information if you're interested.
Thank you.
Yeah, the Humboldt Transit Authority continues to make great strides towards bringing a fully electric and or hydrogen bus fleet to the county. We're actually a leader in the state in a lot of the efforts, including developing right now. This is ironic, right? We have to pay a ton of money in diesel to ship hydrogen fuel to the county because the nearest production site for hydrogen is in Sacramento. So we're working on a hydrogen production site in the county. And so we're making great strides in bringing all of this to the county. So that's really encouraging. My meeting with REDEC, the Redwood Region Economic Development Corporation, we just did some sort of in-house kind of business this month. So nothing really to report out. And then I can share that I'm still working on getting connected to the Arcata Ambassador Program. And so I will give an update as soon as my schedule and the city manager's schedule for Arcata can coincide. So please keep looking for those updates.
Thank you. You want to go ahead?
No, I have nothing to report, except that the committee that you just mentioned, that Cheryl is going to be your second.
Right. Good. Thank you.
All right, I just have a couple of quick ones. I attended the Humboldt Waste Management Authority meeting on the 9th of February. So this, was mainly centered on the new state law about composting and organics collection. And so they covered off on regional organics collection and processing primarily. They shared a new video that they have. If anyone's interested in Humboldt Waste Management Authority, it's kind of good. It shows the whole history and everything. But the most important thing, I think the most salient thing for Trinidad is the estimated timeframe for this summer to be able for them to have the collection facility in place so that you can either drop off organic waste or they will have a pickup service. But the pickup service is going to be Humboldt Sanitation and Recycling. And I called in today. They don't have a time frame just yet. So even though Humboldt Waste Management Authority should have the collection center available in the summer, there may be a bit of a lag before Humboldt Sanitation has the pickup service. So meanwhile, keep composting on your own if you can. And then the other thing was the Water Advisory Committee. We had that last week. The WAC, or Water Advisory Committee, we thanked Eli and Phil. We all took a tour of the water plant. The city councilors and the planning commissioners all toured the water plant, and so that was really useful. But what we spent a bit of time on was talking about some things that are in the budget today, about the plant management through the contractor Coleman Engineering. We also reviewed the agreement with Pacific Watershed Associates and some of the work they're doing to look for raw water storage for the city. Let's see, we also discussed whether to continue to have the Water Advisory Committee outside of the city council. And it was unanimous that we should continue the work because we can go deep on water topics. And some of those future topics will be water conservation and water sourcing, like rainwater catchment, and also the quality of the city's water. So that was pretty much, and then I think the only other thing is that we had 3 of the counselors attended ethics training last week. So that was a good refresh for us that we do every 2 weeks. That's it.
And we should talk about.
Yes.
So Cheryl and I know that kind of a nice intro. We should talk.
Yes, please.
I forget there's people in the room sometimes. So Cheryl and I and our city planner Trevor and our city manager Eli met with the Rancheria and our government to government efforts, really resuming meetings that we held pre-pandemic. We just got out of the sequence of meeting with folks. So it was mostly just sharing updates about efforts that they're doing with their stormwater or let's see, the first one. Oh, there's a proposed that will come to the council for more discussion, but a proposed land swap of a tiny little parcel from the city to the Rancheria on one side of the harbor, and then the opposite transfer or another transfer in the opposite direction, both benefiting the city and the Rancheria. Instead of easements, it'll be a small property transfer. So equal amounts of property. So we just discussed activities that are going on in each of our areas. They had a couple new counselors. We had a couple new counselors. So it's just nice to bring those discussions back.
Yeah.
I don't know if I encapsulated it all.
Yeah, I think the only other thing we talked about was a continued desire on the part of the Rancheria to source water for their new project, and continued discussion with Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District, but also with the city of Trinidad. So more to come on that.
About one more thing I want to add.
Yes. Yeah.
I just want to let you all know, thank you for all of you that missed the last meeting because we didn't have one. It was a Valentine ball and it was a very successful night. And just wanted to, it was very nice that we could get out of the city council. We could use this for a fundraiser. And by the way, the Rancheria was, Jackie was there. Patty made a great presentation. So it was a really nice event. So if you sorry, they'll continue to have it. So come in and have a good time in the town hall, these kinds of activities for the community.
Excellent.
Did you guys have heat? Did you have heat?
Yeah, well, did we have heat for that?
Yeah.
Just checking.
Well, that was important.
Yeah, just checking.
That made it unfortunate. So, all right, staff report. So Eli, I'm gonna
Yeah, I'll turn it over for law enforcement to Lieutenant Josh McCall, who's on the Zoom call.
Hey, good evening. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, perfect. So I know it's the last day of February. I don't have the February stats, but I'm looking at January's, excuse me. So overall for January, I had 202 calls for service in the city and greater Trinidad area. Out of that, there was 13 reports taken, 5 arrests were made, 4 felony investigations and 4 misdemeanor investigations. There was 3 assaults, with one of those being related to domestic violence, 1 burglary, 1 vandalism, 1 general theft, 8 general disturbances, a couple of trespass / prowler or suspicious person calls, and then 1 stolen vehicle or recovery out of that. As far as the other general calls, we had 5 alarms, 6 business checks or patrol checks conducted by deputies in general. Suspicious persons were 3 calls or vehicles, 1 shots heard or possible fireworks, and then 4 traffic stop vehicle investigations, with a total of 165 other miscellaneous calls that don't fall into those categories.
So if there's any questions or comments from the council and then also the public, and just a special note, because we do have some people in the public that we normally don't have. The report covers the greater Trinidad area. So a large part of the activity is actually in the county area beyond the city limits.
So I have a question, but I don't know if Josh will know the answer to this, but I noticed that the crime heat map is different from the report that we get from you. It seems like there are less things on the crime heat map. Do you have any idea why there's a disparity in that data, or is it?
I'm sorry, I'm on my laptop and the volume's not as high as I'd like to be. To which were you referring to?
There's a Humboldt County Sheriff's Department heat map, and you can go there and
Okay.
see all the
Yeah.
report.
Through the
It's like
citizen rims.
Yeah. Do you know?
Yeah,
why?
so
Sure.
I'm gonna guess if you're looking at the numbers look less than that.
Yes.
Yes, because that usually I think, and I'm not super tech savvy with that whole system of that, but I know that's a limited number of days that does it. So these are stats for the entire month of January. Whereas if you were to pop on that map for today, I think that only basically looks at depending on the date range you set up to the last week or so.
Any other questions? Are we done? We're done with councilors? Any other questions, councilors? Okay, open to the public comments, please. I have Anita first and then Patty. Sorry, Patty. She was on her way. Hello, Anita.
I just wanted to thank you for summarizing the details of the activity.
Of course.
Thank you for Patty Feshner. I wondered if your report of the 202 calls for the vandalism officer had anything to do with the breaking of the windows at the library and the museum and the post office, and I've heard Murphy's as well. Was that in the report, and do you know anything about that?
So the stats I'm looking at, which is the same form that's basically sent to the city by the staff at the McKinleyville station, doesn't specify what any of these specific incidences are. If that was the case in January and there was a bunch of windows broken of multiple businesses, especially in the same, discovered at the same time or occurring at the same time, and it was probably taken under one report. So if that occurred in January and that was what was called a report, that's probably what that one vandalism is referring to.
It was February, actually last week.
Okay, so no, that one wouldn't be in here because again, I know today's the last day of the month, but she didn't have these stats compiled yet for February. So this is all January's stats. I don't know what day. That's news to me as far as all those that being broken. Definitely look into it when I'm back in the office, but yeah, this is the first that I personally have heard of it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Patty. That's a good question. I saw that mentioned on Nextdoor, so. All right, other questions or comments? All right, I don't see any others, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lieutenant McCall. So as far as the city manager's report, number one, the website, I signed the contract last week. It was sent to Civic Plus. They will be working on our website update and revision and hosting. And it should be available sometime in the spring is what we're hoping for. And then the stormwater project has a monitoring well that'll happen in the harbor March 6th, beginning in the morning and hopefully ending close to noon, will be the drilling for the monitoring well. It will be done through an auger drill, which will basically have a certain number of blows that can be heard in the near vicinity. We're notifying all residents west of Trinity Street. So basically anything heading down from Trinity towards the harbor, any businesses and residents will be notified to anticipate that sound. I know if I lived in that area, I might just find something else to do and go somewhere. The water plant with the turbidity, of course, that's always a challenge, and then the power outages creates another challenge because the power, yeah, I mean, the water plant rather has to be reset every time that the power goes out. We applied for Measure Z funding, so I'll update you as that moves along. We're requesting money for the Community Ambassador Program and for Pacific Coast Security. And then if we can get additional on-the-ground deputies from the sheriff, then we could possibly use that. That's part of the request. Our audit was completed for 2021, 2022. And the TOT revenue for this past quarter was up, even though compared to last year, even though it was at 8%, but there was more activity happening this past year in 2022 than in 2021. And then just a reminder for all STRs and our B&B that April 1st, the new TOT rate will increase to 12%. And as far as the water loss, it actually went up again this year. I mean, this month, it keeps fluctuating, but it's at 20.65. So ideally, as long as we can keep it 20% and below, we're okay with that. And that's all I have. I'll entertain any comments or questions.
Eli, can I get or can we, and I know this is kind of off the cuff, but any updates on the rainwater catchment? You mentioned the stormwater project and how it was able to fund this rainwater catchment. Is there any update on how that's progressing over at the school?
Yeah, there's nothing really new at the moment.
Okay.
And then a GHD is also working on plans for that.
Oh, okay.
So that's the current stage.
All right, thanks.
Eli, I have a question. On the stormwater monitoring well, exactly what does that do?
Well, the state requires through the water board, requires all the stormwater that runs off and it's going now into the harbor from the city. They want us to monitor the water there and determine certain things that are in the water that are coming from the stormwater in the city and going into the harbor. And they also want to monitor the groundwater in the harbor area to make sure that once the water reaches the ocean and the bay, it's not, having certain pollutants.
All right, any questions on the staff report from the public? Please, Ms. Thompson.
For the city manager, can you hear me?
Yes.
So we don't know why the water loss increased by almost 50% from.
Yeah, well, and it decreased last month by like quite a bit from 24 to 10. 10 was actually an anomaly, I think. Generally speaking, it runs between 15 and 20% generally. So Gabe actually compared this report on that page. Do you have any other insight?
Guess we could just look at the trend for next month.
Yeah, we look at the overall loss at the end, like an annual average,
Yeah.
and that's where we end up with our between 15 and 20% water loss, which is let's just call it an average number for a municipal system. But we've been trying to figure this out for so many years, whether it's the time that they start reading, if they finish like a day later, if they read the master meter first. By the time they get to the end of the route, people have already used water since we read the first master meter. So there's all kinds of different formulas that they've tried to take, and we still haven't really narrowed it down yet, but we think that has a lot to do. Sometimes it'll take them a day and a half to read, and so much water is being passed through meters by the time they read that first master meter. So we have some answers, we just don't have, the exact science.
Thank you for explaining it. Thank you. And I assume that, it sounds like, from what Mayor Kelly said, that you're going to discuss the staffing for the, because I didn't attend the water advisory committee, you're going to discuss that in more detail, Coleman, staffing and what's going on right now with the water plant staffing. running it? Are we gonna discuss that later or?
Well, it's not on the agenda, but I could just comment a little bit.
We do-
So, yeah. So Coleman Engineering with Bill Godwin will continue for the time being to be our chief plant operator. And then we do have one T3, John Janesco, and one T2, Lyle Lowry. And they're working at the plant. And then Phil comes in from Roseville twice a month to just oversee and so on. Yeah, but that's the current status right now. So we're trying to possibly get other things going on, you know, in the near future to help determine who would be the chief plant operator.
So when is Coleman gonna exit? Like,
So Coleman technically will always be like in the background, but hopefully we cut back to maybe around 5,000 a month. But at the time being, until we have someone who's actually the chief plant operator, they'll continue to do that function.
We can talk about the budget side of that when we get to the budget.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you. And then the last thing was, I'm just happy to hear that the city's application for city. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. We're at this point, we are opening up, so this is a good intro to the items from before. So at this time, members of the public may comment on items not appearing on the agenda. Individual comments will be limited to 3 minutes or less. Please direct your comments to the council as a whole, maintain decorum, and avoid personal attacks on staff members or the council and other members of the public. Council and staff responses will be minimal for non-agenda items. So let me ask if there are any items from before. Any question?
Just very brief information, the coastal development permit to complete the Memorial Lighthouse project down at the harbor owned by the Rancho Rio was passed unanimously by the California Coastal Commission on February 10th. Update.
Thank you. Thanks for the update. And that actually did come up in our meeting with the rancheria yesterday. They said they were moving ahead. I think we're going well. So, are there any items from the floor? Anyone on Zoom that wants to raise hand or? Okay. Don't see anything. You guys keep me honest. If you see something I don't. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the consent agenda. So these are items that are considered routine to the city council. Any questions or comments on the consent agenda? Is there a move to? First, we'll go to public comments. Are there any public comments? On the consent agenda? No, there are none.
I'll move to pass the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
All right. All those in favor?
Okay.
All right. All right, so the council passes the consent agenda unanimously, and we are going to move on into the first item on tonight's agenda, which is a presentation from the Tobacco Free North Coast, and this will be regarding the tobacco retail license policy. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Town of Trinidad, for having us tonight. We appreciate your time, and we'll try to keep things brief. My name is Jay Dudley. I'm a project director with Tobacco Free North Coast. We're a regionally funded project covering Del Norte, Humboldt, Lake, and Mendocino counties, funded by the California Department of Public Health. And our main goal is to assist cities and counties in adopting policies that prevent and reduce the toll that commercial tobacco takes on our people and our communities. Tonight's presentation, you have a lot of information in your packet. I know you probably haven't had a chance to look it all over yet, but please do take some time, good bedtime reading. There's a lot of details in there, and tonight's presentation will just highlight some of that information. In August of 2022, the Humboldt County Department of Public Health provided a presentation to the Board of Supervisors about tobacco retail licensing. Tobacco retail licensing, or TRL, is recommended by both the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the California Department of public health as a public health best practice in reducing and preventing tobacco addiction. The board at that time unanimously voted to continue to proceed on looking at a TRL policy for county unincorporated, and they asked that all of the other jurisdictions of the county be brought along in that discussion. That's a good thing for policy, for protecting the public health, but also creates a level playing field for the merchants throughout Humboldt County. So at that time, it was reported the illegal sales rate in Humboldt County was 54%, which is pretty darn high. Similar results in some of the other cities that we surveyed back in March of 2022. So since that time, you may recall that the state voters upheld a ban on the sale of flavored tobacco. We think that's a great thing. However, the state law provides no resources for local communities to enforce that law. It provides no additional funding for enforcement. So we want to see that happen, which the voters approved by margin. We're going to have to make that happen ourselves. And TRL, tobacco retail licensing, is a way to do that. So there's a lot of details in your packet. Some folks here tonight to highlight some more of this information. Caitlin Giddings is with the Humboldt County Department of Public Health, and their program with the county is one of only 3 other counties in California that are addressing tobacco product waste, one of the main forms of litter in our environment, through changes in the retail environment. Tobacco retail licensing is one of those. Then we have up here on Zoom, Amber Weir. Amber works for a project called NorCal for Health. They're really focused on long-term policies that build a healthier community. TRL being one of those. She was instrumental in the TRL policy recently adopted by the Del Norte County Board of Supervisors. So this is happening all over the state. Jay Macedo originally worked in Sonoma County, and Jay helped Sonoma County and other jurisdictions down there help them implement the TRL policy that they have. So he's got on-the-ground experience. He's also a consultant with several of the tribal tobacco prevention programs. So at that, I'll pass it on to Caitlin, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Caitlin Giddings. I'm the project director for Tobacco Free Humboldt with Humboldt County Public Health. And today I'm just going to talk a little bit about the environmental aspect of all of this. So tobacco waste from cigarette butts, vape pens, and the packaging trash that all of those come in, it impacts both the public's health and the environment negatively. Cigarette butts are actually the #1 most littered item on California's beaches and in its waterways. I heard you guys talk about stormwater earlier. It's also the #1 thing that the North Coast Stormwater Coalition talks to me about when I attend. So according to the Humboldt County Visitors Bureau, clean air and beaches are some of the top reasons that tourists are visiting cities like Trinidad and Humboldt County. We found 233 cigarette butts on February 15th when we visited here to do just a local pickup just in Trinidad city limits. And so that's, kind of impactful for us, especially in the off season. On the bottom here, you'll see some of the cigarette filters, which I'll touch on. So these products, the butts, the vape pens, the trash from the packaging, these all leach not only nicotine, but also flavoring chemicals into the surrounding soil and the waterways, which is something we do not want. Nicotine is actually classified as an acute hazardous waste by the EPA, which is kind of scary to hear, for me at least. As cigarette butts degrade, the filters disintegrate, but they do not disappear completely. They actually turn into little particles of plastic called microplastics, and those are less than 5 millimeters long. I picked out a few of them from our lovely pickup. You may have seen some of these just kind of, on the street, near storm drains. And they start to kind of blend in because they just get tramped down and then they're disintegrating into storm drain seepage. So for the first time in 2022, microplastics were actually found in human blood, human organs, and human waste, meaning that we're ingesting these at kind of a high rate at this point. These can lead to chronic illnesses and cancer-causing conditions, not only for humans, but for wildlife. So that's another reason that this is really important. To improve the environment and community health, a proven best practice is to reduce the availability of tobacco products. The option to pass a local tobacco retail license so that Trinidad could more easily enforce the recently passed law prohibiting the sale of most flavored tobacco products in California could have a myriad of positive effects, including decreasing the amount of cigarette butts that we have washing into Trinidad's storm drains and the ocean. Local efforts are needed to protect our environment and community health from commercial tobacco product waste. By reducing the number of tobacco products sold and available, tobacco use and trash will decrease. Next, we'll have Amber speaking on Zoom.
Thank you. Thank you, Caitlin. That was very informative. First off, my name is Amber Weir. I'm project director for NorCal for Health. And I'm here, as Jay mentioned, I'm up in Del Norte County, actually. The weather was a little iffy on driving down tonight, so I apologize. Normally, I like to be there in person. So hopefully tonight you'll be able to hear me and I'll stay connected. I've already gotten bumped off once, but we'll see. My work has really been around the youth and how the tobacco companies market to the youth. So thank you for sharing my my slide there, or my flyer. So what we're really trying to address is the youth impacts. We have an epidemic of youth vaping and becoming addicted to nicotine. And historically, tobacco companies all know, this is well researched and used as the way that they do their marketing. They know that most smokers today started as a youth, so that they target our youth in our communities, and they know that exposure to marketing more than doubles the odds that kids will use tobacco, and youth are more likely to actually be influenced by ads than by peer pressure. So youth are 3 times more sensitive to tobacco ads than adults. I think as we grow up, we kind of get blind to the tobacco being everywhere. I have a short story about a youth. This is before I started working in tobacco prevention. I was in a pharmacy and I had a youth with me, and he started huffing and puffing in line. And I said, "Colton, what's wrong?" And he's like, I don't get it. Back there, we were at a pharmacy. I just picked up my daughter's medicine. They want to save us. And up here, they want to kill us. Like, I don't understand which way. And I had no clue what he was talking about. And I looked forward and I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. There were cigarettes everywhere on the back wall. There were candies, bubble gum, and magazines all right there, right next to the cigarettes. And it was all eye level for him. And he's looking at his surroundings and learning from what is around him more than what people are telling him to do. I think we have some experience in that in our own lives. We learn from our environments and what people are doing more than what people are saying. If that were the case about singing, maybe we wouldn't be drinking so much sugar and playing on our cell phones all the time, because that's what parents are telling the kids that it's bad for. So they really look at their environments, looking at tobacco. So what communities are doing to combat that is adding plugins in tobacco retail licenses that reduce that exposure. And you can do that, simple plugins. I know you don't have a pharmacy here, but in future you may. So requiring that pharmacies don't, if you have a pharmacy that you don't sell tobacco, can be a plugin. There's plugins on proximity to youth-friendly places, like not having ads and tobacco retailers within 1,000 feet of some of these youth-friendly playgrounds, daycares, schools. And then there's caps on how many retailers per population do you need. And what they like to do is have one retailer per 2,500 people is kind of the area we like to be in on that. And I think you might have two, and that might be a little too many. But what they do is put a restriction on not allowing more to come in so that it doesn't keep that influence happening. And then with those retailers that are there and selling tobacco, you can put a policy in place that doesn't allow it to be sold on the countertops or near candy, chips, and soda where kids are, or right by the door where people are coming and going and seeing it all. There's some storefront advertising that has been really adopted by a lot of communities, as far as only allowing 10% of the windows to be covered. And this is actually backed up as well by safety and the crime-free kind of policies, so that when police are doing their routes, they can see in and you can see out, and it's safer for people in those convenience stores. So those are just some of the plugins that jurisdictions are considering when adopting a tobacco retail license that I want to share with you tonight. And next we'll have Jay Macedo, who will talk about merchant education and the enforcement of a tobacco retail license.
Many California jurisdictions have passed and implemented these robust local TRLs. Research has shown that TRL policies have an average annual reduction in youth tobacco sales of 26%, with many communities seeing 50 to 90% reductions. Local TRL fees are set high enough to support and sustain local administration and enforcement. The average TRL fee in California was $344 per year, with $475 being the most common fee. Model TRL policy, and Amber mentioned some of the different kinds of policy options that are in there. Those provide many different options for each community to determine the best enforcement protocols for their community. As state-funded technical assistance providers, or TA providers, our three agencies here tonight can provide assistance with TRL policies, drafting, fee setting, as well as procedures. Many of these based on best practices of other California communities that have implemented them. We offer free compliance support to localities by educating retailers and the community about the TRL, and also about the new statewide flavor ban that was mentioned this evening. Our agencies can develop and purchase store TRL signs, educational materials, and provide merchant trainings, perform store visits and surveys, and assist with implementation such as license protocols, applications, and compliance checks as well. We can work with local law enforcement to conduct those local purchase tobacco surveys. Jay had mentioned the rate was 54% here in Humboldt County unincorporated. So we could help with running those. We could also assist with recruiting young adults for decoy operations. And both of those types of strategies are to help us to evaluate the TRL policy goal, which is to reduce illegal tobacco sales to those that are under 21. Standardized local TRL policies across Humboldt County can help ensure regular education, compliance, and enforcement with local, state, and federal laws. These laws are designed to protect those under 21 from tobacco, and also create a level playing field for the retailers in Humboldt County across all jurisdictions. We respectfully invite council to direct staff to work with our projects and develop this policy for further consideration by the council, And more details on the TAs available in those nice packets that you have, and our contact information is in there as well. We look forward to meeting with staff and with council for TA consultation around tobacco policy. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. That was really good presentation, and you're doing wonderful work, and we appreciate you picking up our litter. I'm embarrassed that we had so many cigarette butts, but I'll be keeping an eye on those now. I just wanted to mention that before I open to questions, I stopped by Murphy's and Chevron because I got curious. Murphy's only sells cigarettes. They don't sell vape pens at all or vape supplies, in case folks didn't know. The cigarettes are kind of by the front door, but they're a bit off to the side. The Chevron proudly sells two kinds of vapes that they pointed out to me. But they don't sell any flavor. They said that's by state law, so I was glad to hear that they're adhering to that. I didn't see a real obvious display of cigarettes, but the vapes were right kind of by the checkout stand. So that might be something we could talk to them about. But anyway, I just wanted to update everybody. And those are, I believe, are only 2 retail outlets. Yeah. So let me open it to any questions, counselors, or comments.
I guess now I know why they were kind of annoyed when I came in and asked the same question. They told me,
Tomorrow, if that's what it says.
people just go in and ask these companies if they are, people who are concerned about this can go in and talk to the store owners and look at the cigarettes. I think that would be a little shocking if people are regularly coming into these stores and concerned about the cigarette sales. So that might be something that could be helpful. But thank you. It was a great presentation.
You mind if I ask about enforcement? You know, it's one of our greatest challenges in a small city is enforcement of any code. Can you share, you know, if there are any similar communities, small communities with limited resources, can you share any kind of success stories with enforcement of a TRO? Anyone? Yeah, I mean, and we do ask you to go to the bank. Just so that people can hear in Zoomlandia and whatnot.
Yeah. That's good. Yes, Harry. So for Sonoma County, there are some smaller jurisdictions, like smaller cities within the Sonoma County area. And I know at least for Sebastopol, I mean, they have 13 retailers, well now 12, because actually their retailers went down once they enacted the TRL. But for them, it enabled them to go by the stores more often because they were collecting a fee from each of the retailers, right? That then funded them, and so they were able to go in there. But it served to not just go in there for tobacco checks, right? They were going in for the alcohol. The 21 is the name, that's the age for everyone, for alcohol and tobacco. So it enabled them to go by more of their stores more often, and they felt like that was definitely a benefit. So it was, but it helped to fund that piece of it. So it's a self kind of funding policy. It's not just another thing that's tacked onto what they're doing.
Sure.
However, what we did also is met with law enforcement and made sure that they were on the same page and that this was something that they wanted, and they felt like it aligned with their community police, the community policing and things like that. With their cop program, it like worked well with that. So that was a good thing for that. So I guess that's a success in terms of they're being able to go in there more often and develop more relationships with retailers. And then as the agencies that we work with, the ones that are down there that are near us, we're able to go and look at education, just like you mentioned as well, Councilor West, is that we went in and did education with them around the TRL policy and talked to them about it. And they started voluntarily doing more, like making stricter kind of policies for themselves. And we're taking things off the shelf, making it not by level. They weren't even in the actual city's policy. It was it was good. I think it was a better relationship, and integrating retailers and the community and law enforcement more, for youth health. So I felt like that was a success.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, let me open to public comments or questions for the team. Don't see any questions, so you've done a very thorough job. Thank you so much. This is very interesting. The council will continue to, kind of mull this over and also talk with our local. Thank you.
Yeah, feel free to reach out to us with whatever you would be suggesting. We can run it through the process here.
Thank you. All right, our next agenda item is a discussion decision regarding the 2022 State Transportation Improvement Program, which is a Trinity Street pavement rehab project. So Eli, I think you're going to cover that for us.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, so this was provided by Josh Wolf from GHD. And so we're able to receive $272,000 from the STIP funding, which will rehab the pavement on Trinity Street. And it is proposed for the construction would actually be happening, I believe, next year, since they do say 2023 to 2024. And as far as I could tell, it was repaving Trinity Street. And then attached to that is the contract proposal for the engineering services for the rehab project with the GHD to do the work. And the very last, let's see, towards the end of it, it actually shows construction and engineering will be happening next year in 2024. This year we'll have the environmental document prepared and then also have the plan specifications and estimates. So the environmental document should be done by July 1st and the plan specifications and estimates by the end of December, with construction and engineering, the bid process and everything all happening in 2024. And then the very last page shows the cost breakdown for GHD services to prepare the plans, etc. So I can entertain any questions or comments that the council and the public have.
Any questions?
I assume that in December, we would get some sort of, design coming back to council.
Exactly.
So
yes.
that if we approve this tonight, there's other opportunities for folks to weigh in and
Right.
say, hey, this is what we want to do with Trinity Street. So,
Exactly.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, and then also next month at our March meeting, Josh Wolf, the traffic engineer from GHD, will be present for that other item that we moved. And then we can also ask him, a little bit more definitive on this, but yes, it will be coming back with the plans for the council to approve.
Do you happen to know how long ago it was paved before? It seems like it's in pretty good shape, but
Yeah.
does anyone know?
I'm trying to think, this has been here more.
I think when we did the stormwater
The
project and dug up the
Okay.
whole street, that was, I don't know if the entire street was paved, but at least half.
Good
Right?
point.
That's actually from the parallel in front of your place
Yeah.
this way.
Yeah, this one. No, I think it was beyond our house that we paid.
A little farther.
Yeah, it's still, and it's, if you go out, walk up another street, it's in pretty bad shape, but it needs a lot of work. I'm complaining about it because I'm just surprised how fast it's deteriorating. So I'm hoping this will not only bring it back to a standard, but also help it stay that way, because I think we've lost a lot of the street over the last, there's just too many big trucks coming up and down the street, so I think it's a great idea. I'm glad it's getting.
So we need, is, the money has to all be earmarked for Trinity. We can't use it for any other street repair.
Yeah, that's correct, right.
And I'll ask this of Josh next month. About, is there a way to, all right, if we know trucks are going to be going up and down the street, is there some way they can engineer it to be a little more resilient? The truck
Good
traffic?
idea.
I'll try to remember to ask that next week or next
So
month.
that's one of the good things about our city is between Main Street, Trinity, and Edwards. We've got 3 streets that basically carry the bulk of the traffic. Right.
It's true. Looks to me like, oh, she gets a great number.
Good. Yeah, you're a runner-up. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was thinking of the Parker Creek Road, that.
Oh, yeah,
We
definitely.
can talk about that separately. Yeah, that's a rough one.
Yeah, and when we do this project too, it'd be nice to kind of look at trying to, get more traffic to come down Trinity Street and avoid Ocean and View. I mean, we've talked about this for years, of trying to direct traffic. Maybe that would be something we could tie into this to try to get that traffic to travel.
That's a great thing to bring up with Josh. It's been mentioned before, so it would be great to tie it into a formal program.
The public comments. Are there any public comments about the STIP program? I see no public comments, so I think that's a wrap, and then we'll look forward to hearing from Josh in our next meeting, and we'll talk about the traffic calming agenda item at that time.
I think we need to,
Vote on the contract.
we need to, I would move that we authorize the city manager to execute task order with GHD to complete the environmental engineering construction and service for 22 STIP Trinity rehab project.
I'll second. And Jack seconded, so all those in favor? Aye. Sir. All right, next up is a discussion decision regarding the temporary closure of the Ashland Memorial Trail and the Parker Creek Trail beach access to Old Home Beach. And I think you had we're going to open up this topic for us.
Yes, so I will open with this. Did make the following comment in the agenda packet. So the Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail and the Parker Creek Trail. And the Parker Creek Trail, it's just a beach access portion, are currently closed. Otherwise, the Parker Creek Trail and the old wagon trail, people can still walk that way without being closed. And this is a temporary emergency closure due to bluff erosion as well as debris from recent storms that battered the coast. A CDP is required within 30 days of closure, which will be towards somewhere around between the 10th and 12th of March. The city engineer and city planner are working with staff as well as the California Coastal Commission, Coastal Conservancy, the Churai Ancestral Society, the Yurok Tribe. We discussed this at the Churai management team meetings where these different parties were present. So several meetings have taken place. We had another meeting on Monday, and we have a meeting coming up on the 13th. In the meantime, I've also spoke today to Steve Allen again, our city engineer, and I also spoke to Giovanni, who works with SHN and was the engineer, actually a geologist. He was the geologist who prepared a 2004 report regarding the beach area. And Giovanni is supposed to be coming next week. And when he does come, Steve Allen will join, and I will go down to the beach and we'll walk in that area and find out some suggestions from both the engineer and the geologist on what short-term measures can be done so that we can reopen the trails as quick as possible. So that's the goal. We want to make sure that number one, that it's safe, and number two, that we have a good way to help address some of the erosion that's happening in that area from the recent storms where the high tide has battered the coast there. So I will entertain any questions or questions.
I see people going down anyhow, even though it's taped off. Is the city liable in any way?
No, our insurance company, we did that with specifically the Van Wyck Trail. And they had requested that for Van Wyck, that we just put closed signs. And we do have a chain across on both sides of Van Wyck. So here in this case, we say closed, and we've got 3 of the barricades connect, right by each other, just saying that it's closed. So at that point, the insurance company is comfortable that, we don't have that liability. or if we do, it's minimized. Otherwise, we have had signage before for the Axel Lindgren Trail, which indicated that it was in poor condition and basically to do it at your own risk. So because we closed it, we removed that sign for the time being. But the prior sign was worded exactly how our insurance company had suggested that it be worded. So we're trying to follow as much as possible, the proper protocol for safety and liability.
Other questions for Eli?
No, what do we have? Are you pretty sure we will have all these trails open by some?
That's the goal, and I personally, again, I'm just saying this first, I can see no reason that they would be closed that long, and hopefully, within a couple of months for sure. So as soon as we can, we will have them open. We just want to make sure that that area where there is the erosion is properly addressed by both the geologist and the engineer.
If you do have something you want to add. I guess I'll just comment that I was strongly supportive of closing the trails. Because we were working with so many different groups that were supportive of that as well, including TAS, the Yurok Tribe, California Coastal Conservancy, et cetera. I do think that the Parker Creek, again, my personal opinion is that we closed on February 10th. It was a 30-day emergency CDP, and my personal opinion is that we should open the Parker Creek Trail at that 30-day window if we can, leaving potentially the Axel Lindgren Trail closed because it is in the worst shape. It would be nice to be able to do the work as quickly as possible to shore up any natural, issues that we have down there. So, whatever we can do to shore it up using maybe debris that we have that we can work, rocks or logs or what have you would be great. But anyway, that's my thought is that we're going to have to open up one of the trails because we're getting into spring and summer, but we'll see how it goes.
And you'll report back after walking the beach with Steve and Giovanni then to get their recommendations about how is this something that a public sort of volunteer crew could get some work done, or is it going to require much greater? So that would be my question regarding the what to do after 30 days is to have a better sense of, is this something that we can mitigate until next year's storms with some more heavy duty work, or is this something that really is got to be a more of an engineered approach?
Right.
So all I would ask is that, what month are we? February, at our March meeting, that we would get an update, to know what's going on.
Yeah. The plan is to meet with both of them before our March meeting.
Good.
In addition to that, some of the conversations that we had were dealing with what would be considered, number one, a short-term fix in order to get the trails open quickly. Number two, what they are calling a medium fix, which they're foreseeing possibly for up to 20 years. And then a long-term fix, which hopefully will go much longer than that. I see that the long-term fix would be probably coinciding with our coastal resilience plan. And then I see the other two, the short-term and the midterm, being addressed by the engineers and geologists as quick as possible, at least for the short term, because beach access is really important for our community. Personally, I just feel like, that right now, because it is not the heavy visitor season, it's really just our residents. But again, we want to make sure that people are safe. Don't want them to go down there and not be safe. So I think as soon as we can get that short-term portion done, I would like to see the trails open.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's one of the places where we have competing priorities, right? On the one hand, we want preservation and protection, and on the other hand, we want public access, and those are both huge priorities for the city. So I think we're all very excited to move forward, so.
And I would ask that we reach out to the land trust, the Trinidad Coastal Land Trust. They have annual efforts to restore their access points. And it's always the last 20 steps that they're working. Right. And so I believe that we have the expertise in the area to do something a little different than what we're doing. And I would encourage us, these trails would be a great place to kind of get our feet under us in that respect. Let's do something different than just hope it gets better. Right. So that would be my encouragement to also bring in. I see a lot of these folks on your write up here, and I would add that, or ask that we add the land trust, just because they've got 6 or 7 access spots on the coast that they're trying to maintain. And they employ quite a large group of volunteers, but they do get it done without, tractors and cranes. I mean, they're doing it with what they can carry. So anyway, I just think there's a solution out there for us.
Good. Good suggestion. All right, let me open up to public comment, and I'll also mention that there were a few emails that were received that are in the packets, or if they're not in the packets, they're online for the council. And so please take a look at those. Any public comments in Zoom land or in the room? Right, we want to look at any of those public comments that came in. Let me just see. I think it might have just been one. So let me have a quick look here.
In the meantime, I did want to mention that at the Coastal Commission at our last meeting was talking about the Table Bluff Reservation, Weoh tribe, and they were talking about how that was addressed, which was done between 2003 and 2004. So that's in Humboldt Bay, where Indian Island is. And they used a process there, which they were referring to, and let me get the proper verbiage here, so just give me 1 moment. So they placed 391 cubic yards of revetment, REVETMENT, I looked it up, it's just materials along a 400-foot long segment of the bay shoreline of Indian Island to stabilize and protect the mound place from further shoreline erosion, help prevent remaining artifacts, cultural resources, and just the erosion that was happening along that shoreline. So basically, the revetment materials is a way to help address shorelines and erosion with shorelines.
Oh, interesting. I was not familiar with the developments either, so thank you. So we do have the public comment on the screen, and I won't read the whole note, but in essence, it's opposed to closure of the trails. And so this individual is asking us to open as soon as possible. So we will read that public comment, the counselors will, and take it under advisement. So thank you. With that, I'm going to move on to our next agenda item, which is the discussion and presentation about the mid-year budget. And so for that, I'm turning it over to Eli.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just start off real briefly. Gabe is our guru, and I'm really fortunate on a staff level to have someone who not only knows what he's doing regarding this, but he's been doing it for quite a while, or at least quite a while since I've been. So basically, we've got the budget, which will be coming up that we would need to approve for the following year. But based upon last year's budget, we like to do a mid-year budget review. And in order to do the proper mid-year budget review, you have to wait until you get all the data from the first 2 quarters of the fiscal year, which would be from July 1st until December 31st. So we finally got the December materials, the financials, which are included in the packet, and then also under this discussion item. So I'll just turn it over to Gabe and let him take it from here.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm just gonna pull a Dick Bruce here and read a little bit from the prepared document that I wrote up, just to keep me on target, because this is an assignment I kind of geek out on sometimes, and I really dive into the numbers, and I could be talking all night, but I don't want to do that. It's cold and kind of get moving. So, yeah, so, but I just want to make, make a couple of points here. I do look over the financial statements periodically, and I am pretty aware of what's going on with our financial situation. And if I wasn't, I would bring it to your attention. I think that's your job as council members, which is kind of how I start off here, is that public entities operate on the fiscal year cycle beginning July 1st and ending June 30th. And let me pause for a second. I'm going to kind of just gear down for a second, because Katie's with us, and she may have not had the benefit of learning, some of these kind of understanding how the city's budget works. So I kind of took a minute to had a couple of notes here about how the system works, right? So the city has a obligation to adopt a budget, a spending plan on or before July 1st of every year. And periodically through the year, it's fiscally responsible for governing boards to do a pulse check on revenues and expenses and ensure that their plans are on track. It makes sense to do this mid-year for us, obviously now. Last year we didn't, because we had so many moving targets. So we just kind of plowed through the year. And then at the end of the year, we kind of poked our heads out of the dirt and we're like, how did we do, And we actually did pretty well, but we lost a lot of employees. We had a lot of what's called adversity, and we weren't able to spend money. So at the end and we had a couple of odd revenue sources, so we ended up coming out ahead, but we didn't achieve a lot of the things that we wanted to do either. So anyway, the tools that we use to develop the framework for our budget structure are the following, and I listed here them on the website, which might be kind of hard to read, but if you have your packets open, it's number one, it's our annual budget, which we adopt on or before July of every year. Budget summaries and narratives included in the meeting packets during the budget preparation. Those are the things that I actually write up to make sense of these numbers. And I oftentimes kind of harken back to them throughout the year when we do these budget discussions, because I'm looking back at what I kind of forecasted for the year, what we were anticipating. And then now 6 months later, or even 9 months later, we can look back and say, hey, were we on the right track? So those narratives I try to keep close with me throughout this process, and you'll probably see them again here in the next couple of months when we break open the 2024 budget year discussion. So the detailed financial reports, which are provided by the bookkeeper, those are 14 pages following this agenda topic here in the packet that look like a bunch of numbers showing you they're basically your profit and loss statements for each one of the city's budget categories. And then the last two things are the general ledger. That is a very huge and extended Excel spreadsheet detailing every single expenditure. So when we see something odd in those budget profit and loss sheets, let's call them, somebody says, why is this so huge and why are we out of whack there? I can actually go to the general ledger and find exactly what was allocated to that budget line item, and I can tell you what it was for. So I can explain some of these anomalies. And then finally, the annual audit, which is what our auditor, Ralph Marcel, has been doing every year. He basically checks all of our work at the end of every year. He checks for loss potential. He checks for, honesty. He checks to make sure that our books are in order as per the state guidelines. So we have a lot of different ways and different tools that we use to manage the city's budget. So included in this attachment is everything but the general ledger, or in the packet is everything but the general ledger and the annual audit, obviously. The audit we're going to be talking about next month, hopefully in summary, we'll be able to just put it up on maybe as a consent item, unless Ralph can be here. But I'm going to cover just a couple of things that are covered in this audit tonight, and give everyone a chance to ask questions. So a quick overview. The budget consists of individual budgets within the following structures. So you got the general fund, and the general fund it has four primary categories: the administrative category, the public works category, police and fire. And those general fund expenditures come from our revenues, such as sales tax, occupancy tax, and different unrestricted funding sources. So in those four funds, this council has the authority to spend money on whatever it chooses to spend on things that are not restricted. And restricted funds are the water and the cemetery, primarily. We also have special revenues that are kind of also called restricted funds. But we call them special revenues, and those are gas taxes and transportation funds. COPS funding, which is a grant that we receive money from every year. And those monies cannot be used to, buy Eli a new desk. They have to be specifically used for specific. So grants then is the fourth category, and those grants are vital, as we all know in this room, are vital source of revenue in the city that helps fund our critical big picture infrastructure and long range planning. So that's the framework for our city budget. So I talked about the types of revenues that cover the general fund, restricted revenues. And I made a note here in this report that the staff report from the June 28, 22 meeting was a benchmark for us, indicating the city's thought process in the financial reporting and forecasting to develop our spending plan for 2022-2023. And some of those highlights I just picked apart from the report, which are also in the packet. I just have three of them here. So number one was due to our staffing issues experienced in the prior year. It was understood that this year would be a year to prioritize recruiting and training new staff, which is what we're doing for the most part. The water department, we're kind of trying, but the rest, Tom, Jennifer, even John Bickley, who we're with Public Works. Most of you know his face and seen him around now. This is what we said we were going to invest in, and this is what we're doing. Monitoring under anticipated revenue sources and economic trends to determine whether dipping into the reserves would be necessary, as dipping into the general fund reserve at the 25K is possible. We did that, but not that much. Our under anticipated revenue sources have actually proven to be better and healthier than what I expect. I always budget conservatively for the city's revenue. So when you read our budget reports, you're going to see revenues that are conservative. You're going to see expenditures that I'm kind of liberal. So that, kind of in a weird way, at the end of the year, we generally end up okay, because I'm not expecting money to come in that may not come in. All of our revenue sources are volatile. Sales taxes and occupancy taxes are two biggest ones, and they could change at any time. Property taxes are stable. So I can budget property taxes perfectly, but I can't necessarily budget sales and occupancy taxes accurately, because as we learned from COVID, we shut down for a quarter and all of a sudden your revenue stream dried up. So the third thing was anticipating a year-end spending deficit in the water fund of at least 200K, another 160 or more for 2023 if the staffing solution isn't implemented, permanent staffing. And that's exactly what we're doing right now. We're seeing that happen and unfolding right before our eyes. And it's not getting any better. And we budgeted for it. We saw this coming. So what else is in here? So there is a page in here that I'm going to touch on for a second in a minute, which we call, Ralph called it the unaudited supplementary budget information. And it's kind of a long word basically for saying, hey, I'm going to show you, he did this. He's going to show us in a real quick chart, which is in the packet, what we budgeted and where we ended up in about 6 categories. And it's awesome. That's good. And I'll point that to you here on the screen here in a second. But it appears that sales tax revenue once again exceeded expectations. Property tax, this is for the audit that we just finished. The property taxes and occupancy taxes did also very well. Uncollected fees for planning and building services from previous years were recovered in 2022. But interest income was down significantly this last year. The economy, the stock markets didn't do so well. And typically, I think the city puts well over $25,000 or more in its pocket every year just from the interest invested in LAIF and other funds. I think this last year it was barely 6. It was a pretty big loss.
And just as a quick note to that, we also had a stormwater project, so we had to draw money out of LAIF to have that ready to pay the bills, the cash flow before we could actually go ahead and put money back in towards the end of the year.
That's true. Good point.
Oh, so that's another loss of our interest is that money was pulled out.
So, and we're probably gonna see that again with this big water infrastructure. Yeah.
What you
Coming up.
call it, the tank
Yeah.
replacement. Yeah.
So, regarding expenditures, overall, the city underspent in all but the general fund expense categories, except for the administrative categories, and that was primarily due to higher than average legal services. We had a lot going on in this last prior year, legal service wise. But we anticipated conservative revenue expectations and underspending due to debt reduction. So it all kind of balanced out in the wash. So staffing, I put a staff organizational chart in the packet because there's been some questions about, who's doing what around here and what's with our water department and, who's full-time, who's part-time, what are we doing? And this just kind of opens the door, I think, for that conversation tonight, whether you want to get into it, I don't know. But I just kind of put some notes in here about our staffing and our full-time equivalent staff. We still are employing approximately 8 people based on the combination of full and part-time staff. So we one person with, if it's a part-time person, it's 0.5 FTE. So full-time equivalent, so half-time equivalent person. And even though there might be 10 people working here, we're really only employing about 8 full-time. I'm sorry, 8 people total, 5 full-time actually. We're still waiting to hire our full-time grant administrator coming on board this next month, Angela Zetter. And we're still trying to kind of swim our way through the water, staff. Which are projects that we're working. Let's see. Financial
And 9 is what, just 9 FTE is, we were at something like 7.5 for the longest time, right?
Barely,
6.5 to 7.5, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Okay.
And we
I just think it's important to say that, and this is a pet project of mine, I guess, or just something I'm really grateful for, is that with the 9 full-time equivalent employees, we don't have the backlog and we don't have the complaints that Trinidad takes so long to do everything. And it's really, I just want to say that it's so easy to observe the benefit of having all these people working for the city. So I just want to say that.
It's a great point, because that was the justification basically for hiring was just Anton sitting next to me here and Jennifer. And I'll touch on the septic program in a minute as a quick, let's call it low light. But those programs just kind of sat idle and collected dust. And those were priorities made by the council. But we can sit here and create programs all day long, but if you don't have people to do it.
Yeah.
And you predetermine that that's a priority of the city has an obligation to follow. So we've been able to do that. We put those wheels in motion from an administrative perspective, but you're right. The city had typically operated on about 6 full-time people in the past. So we've made some changes to that. And I'm gonna say a lot of it has to do with regulatory environment of the world that we live in today. There's so many regulations and there's so many mandates, some of them funded, and as we learned tonight, unfunded from the tobacco folks. We're pretty lucky. We're targeting a lot of the funded ones, and we've got creative grant people to go target those funds, those grant funds to help the city meet its funding its mandate. So anyway, the financial packets included in the financial statements, including in this meeting packet, cover all activity from July 1st through December 31st. It's an easy scan of the primary funds, revenue, admin, public works, fire, and it's just my eyes kind of reiterating to you what I'm seeing. Depict spending at or near 50% midway through the year. When we had you know, some of the guys that used to work for the city as council members, Jim Cuthbertson was one of them that I used to, you know, argue with all the time about this, is he would go down and he would see anything more than 50% at 6 months. He's like, something's out of control, something's out of whack. And it doesn't always work. You know, some of our expenditures are one-time expenditures. So you might see a column in our staff, in our financial statements that say 100% or 0. You know, that means we spent it all already, but you kind of have to read between the lines to know what that expenditure was, you know, but for the most part, as I read through all of the statements, I mean, we were right at 50% on average for everything. And the bottom line depicts that. In some cases, or let's say in most cases, there's some where it's a little bit over and under, such as our fire department. They just budget, they expect the worst thing to happen, but they do it, you know, in terms of spending. They're really thrifty and they get things done. Two of my primary concerns when I looked at this budget, or when I looked at the financial statements, obviously are the water fund and the septic program. And the septic program, you know, it's not a huge concern. And I'm not saying it's there's any right way to fix it. It's nothing but good for the community in terms of, you know, the goals, you know, to make sure that people have functioning septic systems that are working and not creating a public health hazard for their neighbors.
So I think we have one, we all know about like the water challenges, because we've talked about that a lot. We can talk about it some more, but can you elaborate a little bit on this subject? Like where's the
Yes.
overflow coming?
Good point. So, yeah, we have the water, so the septic. So the septic is pretty much overspent in our audit from last year, $11,000, which isn't bad. But you know, relative to the fees that come in. So the city has predetermined what the fee is for a septic permit for a resident. You know, if you have a standard system, it's $100. If you have a non-standard system, it's 75. If you come back and do your renewals 2 years later, it's 75 flat. So what's happening is that we're figuring out, now that we've kicked this program into high gear, Jennifer Hagen, who's listening, I think, out there in Zoom land.
Yep.
You know, she's done a really good job of herding cats. I have seen Steve Septic Service patrolling town more than I've ever seen him. And you can smell them too. It's pumping next year. But that program is, it's just lit up. They're, you know, these inspection reports come into us on a regular basis, but not all of them are straightforward. When Steve Septic Service finds and writes a report that says, hey, guess what? Your leach lines have failed. We have no idea. We can't fill out your report any further because your leach lines have failed.
I don't have it.
Now all of a sudden, you know, we're getting into a dialogue with residents, and Trevor Parker, our staff planner, has to really kind of dig through with a fine-tooth comb, and we need to start documenting several conversations with the residents saying, God, we had no idea we had a failing system. Sorry, City of Trinidad. And then City of Trinidad says, well, have Steve Septic Service send us the quote for the work being done so we can keep our finger on the pulse. We don't lose track of this.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, we've got these, 2, 3, 4 hours invested. And Trevor's billing the city for her time categorized to OWTS. Jennifer's kind of building a fatter file on this one particular property. But the point is to collect the data. So do we want to do a cost recovery system for septic systems like we do for planning? Those are bigger questions that I think the council and that Trevor Parker can, our city planner, can kind of help figure it out.
I like to ask you, just, do you see that changing as we get a better grip on the whole thing?
Yes. We always knew that the initial push coming out of the gates on this thing was going to be ugly. And that's why it took 7 years to get it off the ground, because only one person working for the city, 10 years to get it off. Once they started this, it became this giant can of worms,
Really
and when
important.
people hear that their septic system failed, they don't call us up happy. They're resistant. If anything, like, oh God, don't tell the city, and then we're trying to get information, find out what's going on. For the most part, people have been very cooperative. And it's not cheap if you've got a failed system, right?
I know that.
It's not something people just say, oh, how much is it? I'll write a check, let's fix it. They have to dig deep sometimes to. But to dig new lease lines or put a new tank in or something, and that's not cheap. So then now the city is saying, hey, let's evaluate what they've got going on. Let's see how far we're willing to let them go. Let's put this all in writing. You know, the cash register is now chiming in because Trevor's writing this all up. And then 6 months later, or 3 months later, or 6 weeks later, we're putting the lid on this project and writing somebody a permit for 3 to 5 years. So it's just a big project. And I'm kind of thinking this year, instead of 11,000, it might kind of creep up into the 10 or 15 or 15,000, maybe more. If we continue on this, it's not that fast.
Percentage wise, it's a little, it's an overspend, but in real dollars, it's like.
Right.
And we're expecting this to, once we get on a regular inspection routine.
Yeah.
That we're not gonna see these large project kind of approaches to, wow, your system is, you know, is years out of compliance. And therefore it needs a lot of back and forth, right? We were expecting sort of the front end loaded kind of expenses, but then it should calm down a little bit. So if we do a pricing discussion later on, I would just, it sounds like we're not talking about, well, this is the new normal. Instead, this is, you know, this is sort of this concerted effort to point out how much work needs to be done. But in the future, it shouldn't be so significant, right? Right, whatever that.
It's the cost of doing business now. If you want to call it something like that, you could say, well, it's the cost of doing business. We want to protect the coast. We want to protect the water quality down here. We want to protect public health. You know, we've made a commitment to do that. Let's stick with it. You know, let's have the city kind of absorb those costs. The only thing that makes it complicated is that the city went out of its way to create a permit fee recovery structure. So now I guess we have to just kind of, we'll go another year and just kind of see where we land and take it from there. But we're, you know, so we're basically taking $100 from somebody to do, you know, maybe what is ended up being about $300-500 of work. So
Times 200, whatever properties, that's actually pretty soon.
yeah,
And wait until our project is in before we jump the price up.
yeah, let's wait till your project is done.
Thank you.
So the water and the septic.
That seems.
I was just wondering why my fee was 5 times as much as what was mentioned, but I was like,
Pay for jacks.
it's basically council tax.
Yeah.
Anyway, so those were my 2 big, you know, when I looked at the statements, everything looks to be, you know, expectations. In fact, we're even kind of under, because we still haven't fully staffed or benefited, you know, full-time employees over at the water treatment plant.
Yeah.
But we're paying on the high end to consult. So anyway, that's what I call kind of leaking. So anyway, you know, this was the staff report that I had, I highlighted a couple things in the June 28, 2022 kind of budget approval narrative. And I highlighted, you know, at June 30, 2023, year end, we're projected to spend 160,000. Now that was with, I think we had Coleman sort of sunsetting.
Taking them out, yeah.
Mid-year. So my guess is it's not, depending on where we. So we had our goals set up for us, utilize the reserves established from prior fiscal years, which we did.
Can I ask about that real quick?
Yeah.
Will we, when's a good time to sort of pose the question, okay, we've been dipping into our reserves for the last couple of years. Do we need to, is that more of a next year's budget discussion? Saying, hey, our reserves have taken quite a beating the last 2 years. And propose some sort of way to bring it back up, because we've benefited from having those reserves, but kind of like the lost interest income, right? The less money you have in there, the less money you have to do work.
Yeah, and the water rate study. So as soon as we get that in place.
That'll help us recover.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then, like I have noted, we're pursuing it's called RCAC, which did it for free for the city of Crescent City. So we need to see if we qualify for that. But that would be great if we can get the water rate study done at that price.
I just want to put it on people's radar that our reserve has really been hit pretty significantly, and we ought to work on ways to bring it back up to the levels that we agreed upon several years ago.
Yes, and I think to focus that, the water fund primarily.
Yeah.
And here's why. So what I mentioned, I just kind of touched on it. We call it the required supplementary information, unaudited. This came from our auditor this year. This is a separate document that he sent us. It's a great tool. I like this one a lot because it kind of tells you, where you ended up this last year in the bank, relative to, it's just money, it's revenues. Primarily. So what you see, if you can read this, I just kind of want to point out, he made a nice chart. So for property tax here, if I go across this line right here, 113,525 is what we budgeted. But the county tax assessor has been going around targeting Trinidad. Because I guess there's a lot of properties that went into like a prop something, I forgot what it's called, during the housing market crash years ago. They went into like kind of a property tax freeze from their assessed increases each year. And then the county tax auditor's office or assessor's office has been going around the last 2 years reassessing Trinidad properties, because I guess Trinidad has some nice properties that have good value that the county wasn't reaping from, because a lot of these properties were in like a tax increase freeze or an assessed value freeze.
Yeah, after 2008. Yeah.
So anyway, so here we landed this last year with 130,000. So this is a positive variance from what we budgeted of 16.5. You go across the line, this one got my attention. We budgeted 280,000 in retail sales tax, and this is where we landed.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
So, I didn't say I missed the mark, but I do budget conservatively when it comes to sales tax. And this was so big. And it was kind of an unintended consequence of kind of the COVID year, kind of in the wake of COVID year, and people started shopping online. So instead of doing their shopping at local retailers, they were doing everything on Amazon and everywhere else. And when people do that, that increases the city's sales tax rate. So there is another variance in a positive category for the city. Couple other occupancy taxes, we landed a little bit heavier. See, the license fee, that's not so exciting. Building and planning fees, this is a result of having extra employees that we can kind of go and really get these fee recovery mechanisms executed. Because a lot of times we didn't do that in a month, the residents were subsidizing, someone else's third story somewhere. And that's not how that system is supposed to work, in the planning process, in the building fee process. So bottom line, this number right here is, Steve, this is kind of what we were talking about in reserves. This is what we actually, let's call it bank.
Yeah.
Right? So we banked that in the form of our, replenished our reserves from any underspending the year before.
This was the first half of this year.
This was the finished prior fiscal year, June 30.
I see.
So June 30, 2022.
We budgeted 834,600 in expenditures, and that includes Anna, Jennifer, myself, part of Eli's salary, portion of all of our salaries, city attorney, city building inspector, plan, keeping the lights on, let's just say. And we ended up, we budgeted this much in revenue, and we ended up with this. So putting that in the city's reserves for a rainier day.
Yeah.
That's good.
Positive. Water fund, different
That's
story.
good. Yeah.
So we're gonna focus anywhere, we're gonna focus on our water fund. And then that's gonna come in the form of a rate study. And that's gonna come in the form of what we believe is our ideal staffing solution, what we can operate on. We're gonna have to kind of really focus the about the water fund based on what we think we need and what we expect we need, not kind of this crazy, place that we're in right now.
So it sounds like you don't see any major kind of derailments, just some cautionary issues around water and OWTS. And we knew the staffing costs were going to increase, but we're seeing a cost benefit relationship. OWTS, we're seeing, some additional expenditure, but it was to be expected that we'd have a blip at the beginning. So is there anything else that kind of jumped out at you when you looked at this, Dave, that was like, yay or not yay? I mean, this was good news, by the way. So the banking of this additional money last fiscal was very positive.
Last fiscal year and then the prior fiscal, and we expected this to happen because we didn't have we were just getting administrative staff on board. And they were here for 7 months, I think, once the fiscal year last year, June 30 hit, is that your 7 months? October? So they were still getting their feet wet. And they had not expended money because we didn't have the people to do so. This year, we're kind of moving into that territory from a public works perspective, certainly not our water fund. But I didn't see anything else that really jumped out at me. That's a really good question. And I think that the city is in a healthy place. And I'd also like to maybe open this budget year up when we do our budget season discussions, not to say that we're in a place where we should be being really too liberal with our spending. But I think it would be a great opportunity to explore with the public if there are, or even as council members, things like, let's just say the underground utility project. Let's just see if there's a way we can start investing these savings kind of amortized over time. Of course, we're not expecting to just take that money and drop it on Underwood. But things like that, projects that we haven't had a chance to really fully formulate because we don't know, we haven't been able to see kind of where we're going to land. But now that we do know, we have a little better output and forecast. I think we could entertain some of these projects that are kind of reinvestments in the community. I think the city's looking pretty good. I'd love to see more money spent on trails, improvements, and I think that money's earmarked for that. I'd love to see that happen, but I know there's a lot of politics around that.
We all would.
And that's where council is, hopefully
We're making
opens the doors on that kind of stuff.
Make progress. I think it's kind of a net question, but on the printouts, the percentages at the bottom. So the way I read this is the current month expenditure, year to date, total budget original, and then the percentage of budget. It seems like it's inverse, like
It is.
Okay.
You got to use the word left. So you have, so I always put the word left in front of it. So if I go across to like sales tax right here,
Remaining.
we have 55%. Well, this is the wrong one. But these are revenue. So like if I go to the expense, yeah, so
Otherwise,
like payroll tax.
so percentage of budget, I was like, the tendency is.
And that's where you were saying that Cuthbertson was saying, why aren't all these numbers 50?
Yeah, it goes down the line. It should be exactly 50 on December 31st. And we're like, no, that's not really how it works.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at the total.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to zoom in so anybody can see here, but
Yeah.
this one right here. So year to date, we spent 5,605 of our budgeted amount 12,040, which means we have 53% left remaining.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
I read it, I usually do it the other way, but, okay.
So that.
It's Canadian, or not empty or something.
It confuses me every time I look at this thing. I'm like, how's this working?
And I'm assuming that contracted services keeps coming up as, 6,900%
Yeah,
overspent
well-
because of the Coleman engineer.
In the water fund, absolutely. In the other funds, we're pretty much on top of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Like if a contracted, if finance goes up, we know exactly what that is. In the
Yeah.
water fund, it could be PWA, it could be, Coleman. And it's a line item that we've always had in our budget. It's always been it's always lived there, but we didn't use it all that much for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Now it's really getting to work out.
So councilors, are there other quick questions? I'd like to open up to public comments because I know people have been hanging in and they're cold and maybe we have some burning questions or ones up. Sorry, I feel like.
Man, this is like metaphor night. It's never.
I think Gabe started it with this one. The waterfront continues to leak oil.
They don't mix.
Many questions. I don't mix metaphor.
Yeah, you missed one of them. Gabe was talking about septic and said we put the lid on.
Yes, I did.
I caught it. I caught it, but
You got the lid.
All right, I'll need to get back to councilors for more questions, but let me open the public comments so that if anyone has any comments about the budget, Ms. Thompson. You've been very patient, thank you, and I hope you can still move. Yeah.
First of all, thank you, Gabe. I remember last year when I attended it, but I love the goal and just the way you explain everything. And, as we know, budget analysis drives planning and decisions in order to meet our goals. Here in this, yeah. From the presentation and supporting documentation, quote, anticipated year-end 2022 spending deficit in the water fund of at least 200,000 and another 160,000 or more in 2023 if permanent staffing solution isn't. So last year when the city first contracted with Coleman Engineering, I stated as well as other water customers that this business decision was unsustainable. The community was shocked at the monthly charges, over 30,000 a month. We were charged by Coleman. We're also concerned about water rate increases as a result of bringing on Coleman to run our water plant. And at the time at that city council meeting, it was stated that our water rates would increase. Of course, I understand that our water rates are going to increase even if we didn't have Coleman. I tried to look up those minutes, but the minutes in the website I could find. But I remember it was last year. So my one concern I have is that the water rate increases won't be a direct result of hiring Coleman. But just to continue, yes, I'm sure other people have the same concern. So when we talk about living in one's means, we also refer to finances. So which means if we want to spend less or we want to spend water funds that do not exceed the budget or put us into debt. The questions I have, and also just maybe some ideas out there, I really don't understand the staffing right now. But I do want to know what the short-term and the long-term plans are staffing. So my concern is that we're not in the same situation. Say we hire a T3 person, we haven't put on board, that person leaves, and then we're in the same situation we are now, when we were last year. Then we're in trouble again because we're just, again, it's like capacity building where you're not dependent on one person in that position. Where if they leave, we're back to where we were before. So we don't want to, I feel like we don't want to get in that situation again. I understand we had to have a T3 operator, but we don't want to be in the same situation again. So maybe we have 2-3 T3 operators. I'm sure you probably already thought about that. That's probably a plan. I'm just not aware of the plan. The other issue was, I'm just curious, the approximate amount we paid the Coleman Engineering. And what was the other? There's an idea, I don't know if it's possible, but could the state take over our small water system plant? If we can't sustain it, if we can't get the staffing, could we have help from the state? Probably not. Yeah. Here's another idea. Can we get a waiver from the state with the current staff we have right now? But, I mean, if we could, I don't know what we can do.
So what are you talking about as far as the labor?
For the T3 operator, what, I just don't understand what the staffing situation is and how do we get home in so they're not in the picture anymore. We're not paying them.
So why don't we briefly address?
I have a lot of questions.
Oh, no, it's okay.
Yeah.
I just meant we could, maybe we could address the staffing in a little more detail, because it is in the context of the budget, if that's okay. And then it sounds like we're also talking a little bit about certification of the plant, whether it's T2, T3. We did talk about that a little bit at WAC, that may be getting a little off topic, but we can see what we can do. Like,
Yeah,
how to address the
we
question.
are a T3 plant, but we're not too far from being a T2 plant. So Coleman is looking at ways where we could possibly become a T2 plant. And then we wouldn't need to have a T3
So
operator.
that might mean,
Yeah.
speak to your question about a waiver.
Then we could have maybe got two T2.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, sorry.
Instead of T3.
Yes. So that way we have it where I just don't want this to happen again. I'm sure none of us do. This is really a bad situation.
Right, yeah, yeah, and we have, in the process, Coleman has, two people that, they're talking to as far as taking their exam for T2. And once they take their exam for T2, then they could work with the plant and then eventually become a T3. They're younger and we'll see how their potential is. So it'll just be sort of like a way to see, how they can come along. So either way, they're trying to move some people in. They keep referring to the phrase that they want to work themselves out. But we had a hiccup, unfortunately, where we had a T3 that had been working at the plant and then started working full-time since August 1st. But before January 30th, which would have been the end of the 6-month probationary period. So middle of January, we had to let him go because he didn't fulfill the expectations. So cost is always a consideration, but beyond cost, it's always making sure that the water and the quality is there.
Right.
I have a comfort level with Coleman Engineering because they have a good reputation in the state. And the state had apparently stated that they might have had to step in if we didn't go ahead and have someone like Coleman.
And I realize they did make a lot of improvements.
Right. Exactly.
It's just the cost was too high.
Exactly. Yeah. It is.
For too long, obviously.
Right. Yeah. We were hoping and they were hoping
Yeah.
that they could have pretty much phased out for the most part. So we had to basically regroup in January.
So
And then we were able to get we had the T2 who's currently working. So he was on board before since September 1st. Under us. He started as an employee of us, and then with Coleman running the plant, he became a Coleman employee. And then September 1st, he came back as our employee. So that's the T2 one. And then the T3 one was originally signed up with Coleman, is from the area. And when they were fully operating the plant. And then recently, in January, we reached out to him and he agreed to work at the plant. So he is the T3 that's currently working at the plant. He also is currently working with Eureka and Pelican Bay. And supposedly Eureka is working on getting another employee, so he won't have to work there. Those, I think it's just covering one day there in Eureka, so that he can dedicate that extra day to us. But it's still part-time because he didn't want to work full-time. So we'll see how that all plays out, because we need to get a T3 operator that's a city employee. So that's the goal.
Yeah, so
And
just-
see how that plays out.
Yeah, we have 2 part-time people, a T2 and a T3. So we're covered with Coleman as the backstop as a T3. They're not working full-time anymore at a $35,000 a month run rate. So we expect that run rate, it was like 19,000. We expect it to get to to $5,000.
Yeah.
And then the idea is to either change the plant rating to T2 so that we, don't have to have a T3, looking at that option. And or, as Eli said, we have 2 people that are applicants that, would be our bench. So these would be new folks who are going to come in and potentially at least 1 or 2 of them to get trained and be longer term in place. So we're looking at like, now how can we have 1 or 2 or 3 people on the bench ready to go? So if, because people can leave,
Yeah.
that's tough, unfortunately.
Right.
But, yeah, so that's, I just wanted to recap because I don't want anybody to wonder, I think we don't have people managing the plant as we do right now.
Yeah.
And thank you for arranging that so quickly when this person left, so.
Yeah. Yeah, and as far as the T3, T2 portion, it probably would be a long shot if we end up being classified as a T2.
Yeah.
So at least we're just gonna keep looking at a T3, pursuing the T2, but not putting our eggs in that basket because it would be difficult to get to that stage. Because I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was something like possibly mid-40s, and we'd have to get underneath 40, being like 39, the way they do the rating. So we were close, but we still had a number of points that we'd have to shave off. And we'll try, but I just don't want that to feel like that's a feasible option. Yeah.
What was your other question?
Yeah, so about I understand that we're gonna have a water rate increase, I understand that, that's understandable. But, are we gonna absorb the cost that from Pullman? Is that gonna be?
No, the water. Yeah, the water rate increase, when they do the analysis, we waited because we ideally would have had it done sooner.
Sure.
But we waited because we wanted to make sure that things sort of stabilized in some respect, so that we wouldn't take in consideration full costs of Coleman, but rather their contribution being like Sharon was saying, more in, let's say, I'll ballpark it at 5,000, but maybe even 4,000 or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, I see them as being like a backup. So that at any point where any resources needed, our people can call them, ask them questions, and someone is there to make sure things keep running well as they are right now.
I meant for the water customers.
Oh, yeah, no, as far as the water
Is that gonna
customers,
be independent of Pullman? We get it.
well, it'll still have probably like in the 4,000 to 5,000 range per month. Let's just say, which would be like maybe around 60,000, 50 to 60,000, which would be like for Coleman. That's what we're just saying that may be taken into consideration.
Oh.
But by the time they do the whole study, it might end up being only 20 or 30,000. It'll still be something of at least a few, I don't know what the number would be, whether it's 20 or 30, but we'll see. We'll see how they do it all.
Okay. I think we need to
Yeah.
move on a bit. Other public comments or questions? Rush ourselves.
So this is just from hearing people's secondhand opinions and whatnot. But how many people have cycled, how many city employees have cycled through the water plant, like come and gone over the past couple of years? And is that different than the rate of people cycling through other city jobs?
That's a good question. Eli, do you want to take that?
Yeah. So other than Coleman, as far as city employees being at the water plant, we had, after Ryan and had left, so we had a total of 1, 2, 3, 4 that are city employees. So out of those 4, 2 have left the plant and 2 are still at the
Okay, so about a 50%
Right.
attrition in.
And this is because we're transitioning. We're transitioning, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we also, I think Eli mentioned, we've improved the packet, right? That maybe we didn't talk about this, it might have been a whack, apologies, but we have improved the salary package and benefits to aid in retention. I think that's gonna make a big difference. It's competitive now, so but we're keeping an eye on it, and it's important to keep bringing it to our attention. It's working. Other questions or comments on the budget? And Gabe, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I think I covered it. We're all cold, so. Yeah.
Diane over here, she's like, it's free to get the budget. All right, future.
We could save money.
Yeah.
We can save over $17
Let's
tonight
be anyway.
out of a $700,000 budget. Eli, you're so positive.
Okay, so we're almost done. Future agenda items. Anybody have anything they want to add for the future? I'm sure there are already some things on our list, but if there's anything, okay. With that, then we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for hanging in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nicely done.
Okay, sorry, trying to help. No, that's.
My wife texted me the bonus game was fine. I'm like, yeah, there we go. I'm gonna go home and she's gonna be like suntan lotion on.
I wore a rain hair. This thing has like nothing. Nothing. Oh, yeah.
That's not being on the film.
I have not yet.
Okay.
But
I think they use rated weight basket for their cake. They're gonna look at. I'll talk to them when you get back. I get it. They're gonna look at, and I think touch it later. But it's like they don't look at men's practices. Oh my God, I would have been. Really healthy exercise. First thing after the age. Right. I say they are.
Continue to do better.
Thanks. Yeah. Budget every year. One of the things that I've kind of heard is that. Well, in the rate analysis, how do we cover the cost? Rate and speed. Reserves, and we need to get my highlighter. Actually. With a 5-year maximum cost. Analysis. So